doing Dr. G again, I guess.
Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be doing more forensic analysis of the Epstein files. Before we get started, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. Today, we're going to be analyzing a variety of different Epstein files. First, we're going to be analyzing a forged passport. We're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at documentation around that.
It's because he's a friggin', like I said, he's Mossad. All his shit.
We're also going to be looking at some huge orders of sulfuric acid. I'm going to give you some context for why he might have done that. Then we're going to be
Get rid of bodies?
talking about his
Make
blackmail
drugs.
scheme and hidden cameras. And finally, we're going to be talking about the redactions that the DOJ made and how they might actually try to legitimize those, the ones that were not the victims. Anyway, let's just jump right in. So as you can see here, this is a forged passport by Jeffrey Epstein. This expired in 1987. We're going to get into more of the details and the research the FBI did on this after this was found. So this very much was actually part of the Epstein files. This is very real. As you can see, he calls himself Marius Robert Fortelny, and he says that he is from Saudi Arabia on this. So this very much
It's Mossad ass, like, kind of shit they do.
lines up actually.
That really
if you
is.
watch my previous videos, we talked about his escape plan, that Saudi Arabia may have been one of the locales that he was looking at. This actually lines up very well with that. Let's look at some more pictures of this forged passport, because this very much is real. It expired in 1987. It's an Austrian passport.
Yeah,
And it
this
was
is
used quite a
espionage
lot,
shit,
actually.
Bro. Come on, you're gonna tell me he's not a spy? Like, he has multiple different fake passports.
We can see he went to Charles de Gaulle Airport a number of times, especially in 1982 and 1983. Here's a picture of Epstein I included. This is just for color. This is not specifically associated with any of that. Now we're going to look at some emails from law enforcement that give us more context for this passport, but some very interesting things emerge as we continue to look at these emails. But we're going to start with this one because this is really where it begins. July 15th, 2019. On July 11th, 2019, the FBI had executed a search warrant and recovered two suitcases, a black one and a blue one. Both contained different materials, which we're going to go into after this email, but that's what they're referencing right here. So reviewing
For our special agent, there's his credentials in the wall.
the suitcases this morning, there were 5 U.S. passports for Epstein and 1 Republic of Austria passport. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, Republic of Austria passport number blank. On this passport, it lists Epstein's date of birth as blank. His name is also Marius Robert Fortelny, with a listed residence of Saudi Arabia. Passport expired on May 21st.
Why would they
1987.
redact it? You
But
know
after
who
that, it
is.
says, in reference to the question you asked about the U.S. Department of Treasury Customs service badge. So in other words, if somebody works for the U.S. Department of Treasury Customs, if they're a special agent, they're going to have a badge with a wallet, kind of like you see on movies where somebody has an FBI wallet, same kind of thing. It appears to be more like a lapel pin or a novelty item. The credential wallet that it is in is much too big for this pin/badge. It does say that it is for a special agent. There were no credentials in the wallet. Now, this is interesting because it sounds like they actually did have a special agent's wallet, but it just had this small pin
Why
or
does he
badge
have
inside
that?
of it. But there
How
was
would he
a
get
real
that?
special agent wallet. Just keep that in mind as we keep going, because I think that that starts to build a very different idea about the things that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in.
Mossad
than
ass
maybe we
shit,
know.
bro. It really
Now
is
we're
a
looking at a
honeypot.
document from the FBI on August 20th, 2019. This is about the materials that were recovered on July 11th, 2019, after they had conducted their search. Now, this is talking specifically about the 2 suitcases. The first suitcase we're going to talk about is the black suitcase, but it does get more interesting as we go. So the black suitcase had loose diamonds, assorted cash and currency from different countries, 4 binders of various CDs. Now, what it doesn't specify in here is what's
That sounds like that. Oh, data on people.
on these CDs. If you've looked in the Epstein files or you've watched videos on it, you may have seen that Epstein kept images on CDs. So these aren't music CDs. It's nothing like that. These are entire binders full of discs filled with images.
Images.
Now, it's interesting that he would keep some of those in a suitcase. How many people out there that keep CDs of images of vacations or things they've done, keep those in a suitcase with diamonds and cash?
I feel like it's encrypted shit. Like, because you could encrypt images that have other things inside them too. If they're just like vacation photos. Like, he documented a lot of shit. Like, again, he's doing blackmail, but he also took a lot of shit himself. And again, he's a narcissist. But it's like, it's odd that he did all these photos. Like, I don't believe every single image is gonna be like awful shit. It might, like, he could just be hiding shit inside them.
I suspect
even in the
not a whole
metadata
lot of
match, yeah.
people. So I think it is fair to assume that these CDs contain something very important. I believe it was probably blackmail material or something like
Definitely
that.
was. It's exactly
But when
what I
we're
think
talking
it
about 4 binders of various CDs, that is a lot of material. Now we're going to go on to the blue suitcase. In the blue suitcase, there were 2 binders containing CDs, the U.S. Department of Treasury Customs badge, which we talked about a second ago, expired U.S. passports, which were also referenced on the page above, the Austrian passport, and Marius Robert Fortelli's
Why is that
name with
one
Jeffrey
blank?
Epstein's photograph. I highlighted some cufflinks and things like that, but that's less consequential.
Why did he blur that
What's
out?
more consequential is the note afterward. It should be noted that Special Agent Blank's handwritten inventory that was completed on 7/11/2019 indicated a book of CDs located at the bottom of the page on the inventory for the blue suitcase. So the day that this was conducted, you had a variety of special agents there. You would have had them calling out what it is that they're finding. Someone was taking an inventory. And this is what they do for a living. Just keep this in mind. This
They black. This
is not something that people do casually. Upon review of the suitcase's contents and discussion with the special agent, it was determined that the aforementioned item was made in error and was not located in either suitcase.
Someone lost it.
Special Agent Blank advised the writer that it was possible during the initial inventory of the suitcases she duplicated the entry as items were being called out by the inspecting agents. Now, how likely does that seem to you?
They're all in on it. They're all in on it. I'm gonna keep saying it.
That a binder full of what is very likely blackmail material just was the one thing they accidentally inventoried wrong. Not the 48 loose diamonds, not any of these other bills or any of these amounts of money. What they screwed up on just happened to be a binder full of what was very likely.
Well, it's not the first time they've done this. Like when they got caught up with the pink slips for the freaking child porn thing back in the 80s and the 70s and shit. They the FBI got their hands on it and they went, whoopsies, we don't need to give these out. And this burned, there was like 10,000 names.
Either illicit or blackmail material, or both, actually. So the idea that this is the one thing that went missing, that it was just a mistake, they just happened to do this wrong, a binder full of CDs that someone had clearly called out that they saw, was somehow inventoried wrong. That seems unlikely to me. If you see anything blurred, it's specifically numbers that should have been redacted, actually. So that's all that is. Here are some of the emails about the passport specifically. Now, this shows they were looking into how much it was used. It was used quite a lot back in the 80s, it looks like, from Charles de Gaulle Airport specifically. So he was flying in and out. Let's see, there's Heathrow. There's a place that's unreadable from 1982, but there's a number from Charles de Gaulle.
What's the unreadable one, I wonder?
And it looks like he traveled quite a lot at that time. So it wasn't like he just had this passport and didn't use it. He was actively traveling under another name, under an assumed name.
Like I said, where he pops up and like if you look at his backstory more, him being, because now it went from being a math teacher to physics teacher. I said this before, but it's like he has all these identities. What are they also supposed to be?
Now they do talk about that there is somebody else that actually has this name. So did he just steal the passport and put his picture on it? We don't have details like that, but there is somebody that does share this name. So here we are at 2025 with this email. This was 6 years after this passport was discovered. They had not spent the time to dig deep into what the passport was used for and how it was used. So let me read through this and we'll see some of what was found about the passport. So this agent says, morning, please run the alias in Sentinel and let me know what comes back. Also forward the photos of the bio page and all of the pages of the passport, including the front and back, when we get them. So they're running it in a database to see what comes up. Well, here's exactly what comes up. Sir, as per your request, see Sentinel results below. Attachment from 10/16/2023 shows the name Marius Fortelny was saved in the contacts. Now, it doesn't give us enough context to fully understand what that means, but it clearly shows that something happened with that name in 2023. As I said before, that is a name that other people have, so it could be related to that. But somehow, 4 years after Epstein's death, the alias he was using was in fact marked somewhere in contacts. So take that for what you will.
That's
now, if we go down,
it sounds like he's still using that. He was still using all those aliases.
It gets a little bit more interesting. So they talk about how Marius Fortelny was a victim of financial crimes back in 2015, and then it talks about how there's closed limited information for 3 of these different dates. Now, it could just be old information. However, this is where it gets more interesting. If If you look below that, it says restricted, access denied. So this is the FBI searching their own database, and something about this name came back with restriction access denied.
Probably text back. It goes back to fucking, like I said, Mossad. It's all Mossad.
So to me, that speaks to the fact that there is something that is confidential, highly confidential, about what he was doing. At least that's what it seems. That maybe there's a more mundane explanation, but I don't know what that would be. Now I'm going to cover a little bit about the huge volumes of sulfuric acid that he has. Now, one thing that sulfuric acid can be used for, it can be used to desalinate water, because he did live on an island. It can also be used to reduce pH levels. There's a variety of legitimate reasons.
Or you could be buying some, like, getting some free peroxide from, like, the government people he knows, and just making a bunch of, like, piranha solution to get rid of bodies. Or he's making meth.
The people can buy sulfuric acid. Right here, this is an order for 2 drums, 55 gallons per drum of sulfuric acid. This was on February 8th of 2017. So sulfuric acid does have legitimate uses, but it can also be used for things that are not so legitimate. It can be used to get rid of evidence. There is a wide variety of awful uses for sulfuric acid. Now, if we look down here, it says that the last time calcium carbonate and sulfuric acid was ordered was September 15th, 2015. Current prices on the items are lower than the 2015 prices. Okay, so approximately 1.5 years before, they made the same order. So a year and a half after, they're ordering 2 more drums, 2 55-gallon drums. You follow me so far? So back in 2015, ordered 2 drums. Year and a half later, 2 more drums. All right, so far, I don't know in terms of quantities how much somebody would actually need, but at least it's consistent. So this is February of 2017. Now we're going to jump ahead a little over 18 months, but we're going to jump to December of 2018. Now let's look down under the description of the sulfuric acid that was ordered this time. So 1.5 years later, which I guess is when they would probably run out. So now he's ordering 6 55-gallon drums. He's tripled the amount of sulfuric acid he ordered. You might think maybe it's just to last longer. Maybe he's just going to use it over the course of more years. And maybe so, but it seems suspicious and curious to me that after 2 similar orders of 2 drums, which presumably had been how they had done it previously,
he's having
they didn't
a giant
specify,
meth lab made,
but I assume that's how they had done it before, to triple that amount starts to get a little bit more suspicious, particularly when it's around the time that his new charges started to emerge, when new accusations were emerging. So while there are absolutely, unequivocally, legitimate, real reasons people that live on an island might need sulfuric acid, I find it very curious that that order tripled in the same amount of time from his previous orders. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the blackmail and the redactions. So we've heard before that the FBI has said there was no blackmail scheme. That's complete nonsense. There were no blackmail victims. That didn't happen.
That's, like I said, there's no conspirators, or whatever the fuck it is. They haven't interviewed any of the kids either, or victims, I should say.
But if we look at this right here, I want to read you an email. Jeffrey, I already purchased 2 of the motion sensor cameras from the spy store in Fort Lauderdale yesterday. I charged them last night and figuring out how to work them as we speak. It's amazing how small they are, the size of a thumbnail drive, 64-hour recording, motion sensor. I'm installing them in
spy shit
to a Kleenex box right now. I'll bring them later today. So right here, we have evidence that he had hidden cameras, that in 2014, he was working specifically on newer, smaller hidden cameras. Now you can see an image from one of these hidden cameras. He very legitimately not only talked about them, but he actually used them, and there is actual footage from them. The footage has actually been taken down at this point, but I do have a still from it, and that's what this is right here. So I know it's hard to see, but there absolutely were hidden cameras in his house. Now that takes us to talking more about whether or not he was in fact blackmailing people.
Because he was. You
can see in this email right here from 6/25/2012.
How much evidence do we all have to see?
The subject line is reminder: take home thumb drive, drag it to trash before taking out. So these were people that covered their tracks. This was something that he was actually actively getting rid of. So just imagine that anything we found were things that he didn't dispose of. Can you even imagine of what was on something like this? That was something that was on a thumb drive like this. Now let's go and look at the law that was created. We're going to look at the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Now, I want you to keep in mind, this is a literal law. This was signed into law by President Trump. This is not just a suggestion or a guideline or a memorandum. This is a literal law that was signed into law. Here's what is prohibited from redaction. No record shall be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. So, in other words, you cannot redact somebody's name because it's going to embarrass them. You can only redact somebody's name if they are a victim. We're going to go through the specific reasons you can redact somebody's name right now.
Go over this
now,
already years
if
ago.
you notice a little blurred section, that's specifically because I don't want to trigger any issues with this video, so I am censoring certain things. It's nothing of relevance to what we're talking about, though, so just understand that's what that is. So here are the reasons that you are permitted to withhold and permitted to redact information. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, may essentially withhold or redact certain portions if they contain personally identifiable information of victims or victims' personal and medical files and similar files, the disclosure of which would constitute a clearly unwarranted...
So wait, but who are they classifying as victims? Because, like, you see what they're doing, like the wordplay? Yeah, victims. Are they considering the people that are being honeypotted victims also?
Warranted invasion of personal privacy. So obviously you don't want to reveal victims' personal information. I think that's sort of the whole point of redacting anything in the first place. So that's very clear. Now, the other ones that are also potentially significant would jeopardize an active federal investigation or ongoing prosecution, provided that such withholding is narrowly tailored and temporary. So in other words, if they're investigating somebody, then you could potentially redact their name. But Pam Bondi was very clear that they are, in fact, not investigating anybody at this time, from what it sounds like. And then below that, something that's also extremely important, all redactions must be accompanied by a written justification published in the Federal Register and submitted to Congress. Now, maybe that's already happened, but it does sound like they will have to have legitimate reasons that all of the names that have been redacted were redacted. They have to actually explain that to Congress in a Federal Register. So when we go up to a document like this, where Leslie Wexner, who actually originally was redacted, no longer is, so how is it that there can be co-conspirators that remain redacted? How is it, given the specific rules that they have, how could they redact these people and try to get away with it? There is actually one possibility. There is one argument that could be made. I'll be very curious if they actually try to make this argument.
He's going to probably say what I said. They're going to try to say they're victims.
If these people are actual victims of blackmail, then they could be considered
I literally
victims.
just said that. Yes, that's exactly what I think they're doing. They're going to use the word against
argue that they should remain redacted. But that would mean that the FBI would then have to release evidence and would have to make that argument, which they have said there was no blackmail. That didn't happen. That never happened. But the only legitimate explanation that is in line with the law for redacting these people is if they were provably victims of blackmail from Jeffrey Epstein. And that goes against what they've said. So I'll be very curious if that eventually comes out or if that is eventually their argument. All right, we'll go and wrap things up here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of the documents that we looked at today. It's only getting stranger. The more we find out about Jeffrey Epstein, the deeper and more complex it goes. And I'll be
good. Have a good day, everybody. I had to make a video.